The modus operandi of today's economy, especially in rich and powerful nations like the US, can pretty much be summed up into two words: endless growth. The way it works is very basically, we retrieve resources from the earth, use them to create goods. Those goods are bought, sold, gifted, or by any other means distributed to people in the world. We use them until they break or become obsolete, and then we throw them in the trash. After that, the cycle of extraction, production, consumption, and disposal starts anew. There's, of course, more nuance to that. For example, people still absolutely repair items when they break. Many products can be and are effectively recycled, and hey, I use tons of essentially obsolete technology all the time. But that's not the point. The point is that in today's economy, we're operating on an endless growth mindset. The idea that we can, or maybe should, continue this cycle indefinitely. Extract resources, produce goods, consume goods, then trash them. Over and over again, taking from the earth and returning it only in waste. And over the last several decades, it's felt like this cycle has picked up its pace. You may or may not have heard the term planned obsolescence. EBSCO defines it as a strategy employed by manufacturers that aims to deliberately shorten the lifespan of products to encourage consumers to purchase replacements more frequently. In other words, purposefully making products that don't last as long so that consumers have to buy new stuff more often. When we think of planned obsolescence today, I'm sure the brain jumps immediately to companies like Apple allegedly slowing down their iPhones, or even fast fashion brands producing clothing that simply doesn't last as long. We think of it as a modern issue. They just don't make them like they used to. And while that isn't entirely wrong, it's absolutely gotten worse in the past few decades, we can actually place the first example of a company provably doing planned obsolescence in the late 1920s. Between the years of 1925 and 1939, light bulb and other electronics companies from around the world, including General Electric, Tokyo Electric, and German light bulb company Osram, and many more, formed what became known as the Phoebus cartel. Now, I could make an entire video about just this story because it is fascinating. But the gist is, the cartel intentionally worked to make light bulbs that would last a shorter amount of time so that consumers would have to buy replacements more often. Specifically, they worked to standardize the life expectancy down to 1,000 hours from 2,500 hours in years past, at the same time raising prices without any fear of competition. Eventually they dissolved, and in fact many of the companies involved were punished, but their plan ultimately worked. They sold more light bulbs at higher costs, with worse quality, and made a ton of money from it. And companies across the world have been accused of doing the same today. Now, there are two types of planned obsolescence. The first is exactly what the Phoebus cartel did, intentionally designing products to only last a certain amount of time until the consumer has to buy a new one. This is called obsolescence of function. The other kind is a bit more psychological. It's referred to as obsolescence of desirability or obsolescence of fashion, and it happens when producers release products with different designs, a new innovative feature, or otherwise modernize their latest products. This creates an incentive in some consumers to keep up with the trends or update their now seemingly old and dingy goods for new ones. We see this with new iPhones coming out each year with a different color or a slightly better camera or other small changes that make the consumer feel like their older phone is outdated. Whether through fashion or function, companies are intentionally creating products to be dysfunctional and need replacing within a few years. They're designing goods to ultimately and artificially fail, and they're profiting from that intentional failure. Alright, so companies are making shitty products and making a whole lot of money off of me and my friends. Well, what if I just fix that stuff when it breaks? Not play into the consumerist game and take matters into my own hands. I like how you're thinking, friend, but guess what? Sometimes that's illegal. Many of these big brands who've been accused of planned obsolescence, think Apple, Nintendo, even the tractor company John Deere, have also been caught up in a number of legal battles surrounding the concept of right to repair. Now, the name is pretty self-explanatory. It's a legal concept / advocacy movement that advocates for the right of consumers to, you'll never guess, freely repair and modify the devices and equipment they own. To the layman, it might sound obvious or even redundant to say that that's a right people ought to have, but it just isn't that simple. Let's use John Deere as a case study. For the past few years, farmers have criticized the tractor company for restricting access to maintenance tools, manuals, and training, and for actively working against right-to-repair legislation that would allow farmers to independently fix their own equipment, as opposed to having to go through officially licensed dealers and mechanics. Dealers and mechanics, who were often more expensive, took more time to perform repairs than independent mechanics, and were often inaccessible in the rural communities that many farmers live. Now, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand why higher costs, longer delays, and inaccessible mechanics are bad for farmers. If farmers who desperately rely on this equipment have to suffer artificially long wait times or drive hours just to get their equipment fixed, tight planting and harvesting windows could be missed. And for many, that would mean an entire season of work and much-needed income would completely vanish, potentially devastating their business. And more than restricting access to repair tools, John Deere has actively fought against legislation that would protect consumers. In 2020, multiple John Deere dealerships lobbied against a right-to-repair bill being discussed in Maine. In 2021, the company was criticized for not upholding a signed agreement that ensured they would provide manuals, training, and diagnostic software for tractors. And early last year, the company began to fight back hard when the Federal Trade Commission filed a lawsuit against them that claimed they were unlawfully inflating repair costs by monopolizing the repair market. That suit is still ongoing, so I can't tell you exactly how it ends. But all in all, they have fought the FTC's accusations by claiming they've done nothing wrong and that they support the consumer right to repair, all while blatantly restricting access to repair tools and advocating against right to repair laws in many states. John Deere is not the only company accused of restricting access to repair tools. They're not even the only ones to actively lobby against right-to-repair laws. And they're not even the only manufacturers that have been sued by people who are unable to repair their products in peace. Apple is notorious both for planned obsolescence and anti-repair tactics. In many cases, parts aren't directly available for Apple products unless it's through licensed dealers. In the past, they also took heat for making iPhone batteries completely irremovable, meaning if your battery was bad, your only option would be to purchase a new iPhone entirely, and many, many other instances. Anti-consumer and anti-right-to-repair stances taken by corporations are not unique. From Phoebus to phone batteries, companies have worked for decades to make products not for the consumer, but for seemingly endless profit. And in many ways, this all hurts more than just the consumer. For many, these issues seem purely economical. I'd even say within a lot of consumer rights advocacy circles, the issue of environmental sustainability is either on the back burner or completely missing from the conversation. And as an environmental scientist and just a person interested in repair, I believe making the connection between these topics, realizing just how intrinsically related our economic systems are to the environment and our impact on it, is critical. That endless growth mindset I talked about earlier, simply put, is impossible. Physically, our planet does not have the resources to continue that cycle. We are rapidly depleting the Earth of its resources, of the habitats of organisms who make our world run, and ourselves our own quality of life, both in the future and now. Endless resource extraction on a planet with limited resources is not a thing. Oil and gas fossil fuels, precious metals and minerals, certain animals we use for food or anything else, if not properly handled, will run out eventually. And in its place will be the mountainous landfills from all of the stuff we threw away. Okay. Goods are being made to break, and companies are trying to restrict my ability to fix them when they do. And in the process, the endless cycle of consumption and disposal goes on, and our planet is suffering. feel like the video up until this point has been really just about the problem. And if you're feeling hopeless, just know I'm getting to the solution. But it is an equally large and nuanced discussion. You remember the Phoebus cartel from earlier? How I said I could make a whole separate video about it? Well, you're not getting a whole separate deep dive, but I'm gonna tell you more about it, and about this light bulb I met. Gravity's Rainbow is a 1973 novel by Thomas Pynchon. It's primarily set in Europe around the end of World War II, and what I want to talk about actually has nothing to do with the main plot of the novel. In fact, I haven't read more than the 5 pages where Pynchon talks about Byron the Bulb. Byron the Bulb is a character in Gravity's Rainbow who is a sentient, seemingly immortal light bulb who, in the fictional world of Gravity's Rainbow, fights to take down the Phoebus cartel. He communicates with other light bulbs, only a few of which in the world are immortal like him. He talks of solidarity with all the other bulbs he knows are planned to not last. He spreads word of the CIA-type organization that is the Committee on Incandescent Anomalies, and how they're spying on and attempting to sabotage he and the other immortal bulbs.
I anticipate the terminus of Gravity's Rainbow.
Gravity's Rainbow?
It's a novel.
Yeah, I know. I haven't read it, though.
Neither have I. Nobody has.
The intense satirical circumstances are not necessarily what's important right now. What's important is that Pynchon spoke directly on the topic of planned obsolescence, and past the often absurdist, beatnik-esque writing lies a deep, important message that brings to light not just the actions of companies like those in the Phoebus cartel, but of governments and their complacency within it. What if I told you Byron the Bulb is real? I mean, not literally. Unfortunately, we don't have sentient light bulbs yet, but the immortal part isn't that far from reality. You see, there's this light bulb located in Livermore, California, that was first illuminated in 1901, and excluding a few brief moments since, it hasn't gone out. The Centennial Light, as they call it, has been fully functional and operating for over 125 years. And yet, I still have to buy new light bulbs. The point of this entire digression, besides to share my love for Mr. the Bulb with you all, is to say that we can make things that last. There are Doc Marten boots from the 80s that are still in fine condition, and they're saved on my eBay watch list for when the seller puts them at a lower price. I have a CD Walkman from the early 2000s that has nothing wrong with it, minus some paint that's come off. And yet the computer I bought 5 years ago when I began college has already had to be replaced. The choices to degrade the quality of modern products and to restrict access to repair tools are intentional ones, made by manufacturers for no other reason than to gain profit. But there is another way. I want to talk about the concept of a circular economy. The EPA defines a circular economy as an economic system that keeps materials and products in circulation for as long as possible. In the simplest terms, it's taking reduce, reuse, recycle to a systemic level. In a circular economy, products are engineered such that they last as long as possible. They can be repaired if something goes wrong, and at the end of their life cycle, their components are as close to 100% recyclable as we can get them. It's a system founded on repairability and longevity, as well as waste reduction, whereas the endless growth economy of today works with the built-in assumption that everything is replaceable by simply buying a new one. I wasn't alive when glass Coke bottles were still the norm, but maybe someone watching remembers a time when they were. In that time, up until around the late 1950s, most drink containers were returnable and could simply be washed and reused by bottling companies after consumers brought them back. Or, a practice still done today, is when I take my old car battery to Rural King for them to recycle, and they give me some money as an incentive to recycle. A circular economy can be actions as simple as this. That's not to say that switching completely to a circular model would be simple. In fact, a lot of aspects explicitly wouldn't be. But in the fight against planned obsolescence, restrictions on repair, and environmental destruction in the hands of corporations, a push towards circularity is paramount. Those mountainous landfills littered with broken Apple gadgets and bulbs, the tractors collecting dust in the farm sheds out in the country, they don't have to be our reality. Supporting efforts to move towards circularity can happen on many levels. Individually, you can support companies who tangibly work to improve their products' repairability and recyclability. You can learn how to fix things for yourself and for your community. And you can educate yourself on consumer rights topics. And on a larger scale, you can get involved in consumer rights and sustainability advocacy, even if it just means talking to people about it. There are a number of organizations I'm listing both on the screen and in the description of this video that advocate for right to repair, environmental sustainability, circular economy, and even some that advocate for open source technologies that are more accessible for consumers. There's a YouTuber I follow, Louis Rossmann, who makes mountains of content regarding planned obsolescence, right to repair, as well as a lot of interesting videos on ownership and about consumer rights in software, streaming, and other digital products that I highly recommend to anyone first dipping their toes into these conversations. But more than that very important advocacy work that Rossmann and many others in the world are doing, is a recognition that it is the companies involved who are ultimately at fault. The massive amounts of waste and environmental destruction are direct actions taken by corporations, not people. It is absolutely within our power to do the best we can, to learn how to repair things, to support companies who want to improve circularity, and to advocate for what's right. But at the end of the day, it is corporations who are actively making decisions that hurt consumers as well as the planet. And if you take anything away from this video, I hope it is this.
This is a systematic issue. Obviously, it's quite empowering and usually pretty fun to learn how to repair things for ourselves, or our loved ones, or our communities, but it's ultimately corporations and governments who hold the power to make major changes in how we view our economy, ownership, sustainability, right to repair, or any other issue I talked about in this video. It's wonderful that individuals want to make changes to their daily lives to fight these issues, but it is ultimately corporations and governments who got us into this mess, and they owe it to everyone to get us out of it. So maybe go out there and make some trouble for them.